Hey everybody, so today is all about hard surface, which is kind of a weird subject inside of ZBrush. I personally like modeling in ZBrush and hard surface, but then again, I just like modeling in anything at any time with any tool because I think it's all fun. To me, it's like playing with Legos when you get used to the process of it. You can kind of make anything you can think of. So what I want to cover today is specifically one workflow. Now, if you look at some of the videos I've put up for the class, you'll see that there's like so many ways of doing hard surface. We can sculpt it, we can import it, we can make it inside of this program with like retopology tools. We can use ZRemesher. In this case, I'm going to show you how we can use ZModeler, polygroups, and the dynamic subdiv to make our hard surface objects, especially if we're working out of something that's relatively simple shapes. So let's get started. I've been dinking around with this model today. Probably spent, I don't know, maybe I'd have to guess how long I spent on this. Maybe an hour or two, really dinking around with this. But I did a lot of breaks out there to just kind of chat with people and talk about different stuff. So didn't probably spend a ton of time super focused on fixing anything. And you can see, like, with the right tools, you can bring together the base of whatever you're working with pretty quickly. Get my screen to knock me out of the background a little bit better. There we go. Not there. Okay, that'll be a little better. I'll be fading to the background. It'll be super ghosty, but that's fine. So what I'm going to be doing today is showing you how a couple of tips and tools that I work with this program, and then I'm going to dive into this and show you how we can put some of those things into action and how we can use things like live Booleans to work relatively non-destructively, which gives us a lot of flexibility as we're working. So with that, I'm going to just go ahead and give it a quick save. By the way, this is a concept from, let me get the name of the artist because you always got to give credit where credit is due. What do? I always have a hard time figuring out what are the things that I like. There it is. So this is from an artist, concept artist named Fernando Carrera. He had some really great concepts on there, and I just liked this idea of a tiny little holdout pistol was a cool little project. So before I dive any further into this, let's talk a little bit about all these different tools and how we use them. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new tool in here. Just open up my thing, and I'm going to start it with the regular cube so I can show you why we don't use this cube. So here's a basic scene, and I want to show you the different tools we have available to us to make something that has that hard surface look or object. Now, of course, up until this point, we've largely done things where we subdivide a few times and then we smooth things out. Oh, make that a poly mesh. And then we smooth and sculpt things out. And this is really great for the kind of work we've been doing up until this point in class where we're just kind of carving in organic things. But what if I'm trying to do something that looks like it's hard surface? What if I'm trying to do something that looks like it's made out of sharp edges and things? Well, it becomes really, really hard to control it with these kinds of tools, especially considering most man-made objects are pretty flat, simple surfaces. Whether it's like a coffee mug or the microphone I'm talking into, even my mouse, most manufacturing is done by taking some amount of material and removing it until we get what we want. A lot of metal manufacturing is done this way, and some of it's cast, but even then it's cast into usually pretty square shapes. So most human and man-made objects, while we learn for the kind of organic sculpting work we do, that sure, characters are built up of simple objects, spheres, cubes, cylinders, especially hard surface objects are very clear made out of simple shapes. So the reason, though, I don't like to start anything with this kind of cube is because it actually has all of these poles at the top. The default cube in ZBrush is not great to work with. In fact, the cube we prefer to work with looks something like this. If I come down all the way to the bottom to initialize, there's this little button. It's called Q cube, and it's generally not subdivision levels. Well, let's get rid of this. Delete higher because I don't need any of these. cube, and it'll just replace it with this little cube right here. And this is a much better cube to work with. In fact, we can see it's made up of a bunch of sides. Each side of the cube has 4 polygons. In other programs, we call this faces. Here in Zbrush, we call them polygons. And you'll find that we have kind of built into Zbrush a pretty standard modeling package, although because it's Zbrush, it's done in a super weird way. So we can use this with the tool. And again, the reason I use this is it doesn't have a bunch of poles. It's all even on every side. It's much easier to like go off anywhere with, because we can extrude or Q-mesh stuff off of it. And we do this with the Z Modeler brush. BZM is our default shortcut. And this will let me say, let's do the default settings of single poly with Q-mesh. Lets me just pull out and even push back in surfaces and shapes. It lets me lift things up. And you can see with a couple quick movements, I can create some interesting shapes just by pushing and pulling things around on my model. This is the basics of our Q-mesh workflow. One of the things that's nice too about Q-mesh is not only can we push in, we could push all the way through, and it will create a hole for us all the way through our geometry, which is something actually a lot of extrude tools can't do, although Blender's got one forthcoming. So this is pretty cool because we can make pretty simple shapes out of it. If I'm making this and I want to turn this into some sort of sword with a hilt kind of a deal, like I want to make this the hilt of a sword, let's just rotate so we're looking at the front view, and I can hold Alt down and I can create these little white areas which denotes where it's going to happen, and I can Q-mesh the whole thing out. Maybe do the same thing down here to make the bottom of the hilt for my sword. And if I want to make a connection between these two, I can Q-mesh those up a little bit, like so. And you can see we could start to create some shapes in a very simple way. Shift F can turn off to see what the preview looks like. Now this is all well and good, but of course we usually want to do more complicated stuff than that. So let's go ahead and I want to show you how I'm going to take my object here and I'm going to make a super simple, like just medieval sword, really standard, out of a couple cubes, 2 cubes and 2 cylinders. So another way we can create this, instead of going into this menu, another way we can create objects is by going to, let's go to W, which is our gizmo, which you'll be using a lot of. So you'll be using a lot of Z Modeler and a lot of this gizmo to move and manipulate things around. And almost always want to be in symmetry. If I click this little gear on my move gizmo, which again I can get with the W tool, I can set all of these different primitives along the top. And by clicking this, I actually am getting, hit F and it zooms in, these different primitives. And they have different settings with these little arrows that I can pull to change things like radiuses, curvatures, all sorts of cool stuff. In this case, I want to do a sword. So I'm going to start with 1 polycube like so. And the number of divisions is all set on this. And I don't want any divisions anywhere on the cube. I want it just like this. Actually, let's build the hilt first. I think that'll be good to go. So I actually want, because I'm going to be going left and right with it, I want a left side and a right side, like so. Now I can hit W again, which returns me to this gizmo. And this lets me start to shape and pull the whole object out. So let's say I want a nice curving hilt to everything. Well, I can do that by stretching it out. And well, actually, you know what, another thing about it, let's just build it in the simplest form first, and then I'll start building out the pieces. Now, of course, we know we want to keep things separate. If we wanted to stay separate, it works a little bit better. But what if I want to change the overall shape of this? Masking really comes into play a lot. So I use the mask lasso brush rather than the mask curve pen because it lets me quickly come over areas. And let's make sure I'm in symmetry here. I can tell if this little red dot only shows up on one side and not the other. I know I'm not in symmetry, so I am now. So I'm going to mask these, Control-click to unmask them. And then I want to scale it in everything but this axis. So if I hold Alt, I can scale it and I can get a little taper in. And that's going to be the start to my hilt. So the orientation of the sword is going to be, I'll say forward, or let's make it run up, down. Let's do that instead. So I'm going to rotate this, clear my mask, hold Shift, and then I can rotate this full up. So now I want to get another object, right? I could come in and go back into my tool and I could append another thing, but what I'm going to do instead is add another sphere, or I'm going to add a cylinder to make the hilt. Now, if I just add a cylinder like this, it'll get rid of whatever I had there. But if instead I mask the whole thing, and I can do this just by clicking Control Anywhere, hitting W on my keyboard, this is where that cylinder is now going to come into place. And I want the cylinder to be down here because that's where I want my hilt to be. And I can click it, and I can now go to this guy right here. Either this cylinder or this cylinder, they're relatively the same. One's in quads and one's triangulated. But I'm going to hit poly cylinder, and we can see now it's giving this little poly cylinder. And I want to set this to about 8 sides, which is the smallest number I'm going to want. And I can choose the number of divisions that run along it. For now, I don't want any divisions along it. And I'm free to move and manipulate this hilt of this blade by itself. So let's scale this down, pull this out, and I'm going to stretch it a little bit this way because these are never perfectly straight on. So something like this. Now I got both these pieces together. What I can do with this still masked is go to split unmasked parts. And in fact, I use it so frequently, I pulled it up into this little window. So you see a couple things I've added that I'm going to be showing you that I'm using as I'm going. But we'll see that in a second. I'm going to hit split unmasked, and it's just going to turn this into 2 separate polygroups for me right off the bat. A little quicker. That way I can come back to this object and stretch it out. Now you notice wherever this gizmo is how my scaling works. So another hotkey I use a lot of is this go to unmask mesh center. Now if I press this without holding Alt, it just snaps right into the center. Usually I hold Alt with these things because it keeps it from rotating or scaling it back out, but that little button will always return it to the center of your object. So now when I scale, it's scaling along the center of the object, much more predictably, much more like what I want. Now let's make a pommel, and actually first, let's take this. We're gonna mask this area down here, and then Control-click to undo that. And now I can say that little button will now take me to the unmasked center, which will let me create like a little taper in for my hilt or my blade. Now I have the same deal. This whole thing is here. Let's Control-click, and let's add in, this time I'm going to do this cylinder 3D. And we see the difference between that one and this one is this one has holes, which for what I'm doing is actually going to work pretty well. I want to make this smaller, and I want to rotate this holding Shift on its side, scale it down, and that becomes the basis for my pommel. Let's go to split unmasked points. So now it's by itself. And we got one more thing to make. I'm going to make the blade now. Same deal. I want the blade to kind of start maybe like right about here. So it's in the center. It's going up. And this one I'm going to make out of a cube. And this polycube, oh, I got to mask everything first. Control-click. Hit this little button. Polycube. And I don't want any divisions in any direction here. And I'll show you why. What I'm going to do, take the whole thing, and I'm going to hold Shift and just rotate it on 45 degrees. Then you see this reset mesh orientation. If I just click it, it'll rotate it back to its original position. If I hold Alt though, we see that this little unlock symbol goes, and it means if I click it now, it resets the position without moving the object. Great, because now I can just scale it in this axis, and I've got the basis of my blade. So let's make this as long as we want to make it. So same kind of deal, I'm clicking, I'm dragging, I'm unmasking just one of the regions. At any time, I can hold Alt to move this little widget around, and it will just move it, and then I can, manipulate it from there. And I kind of bring it up, and I scale it in a little bit. Looks like I lost the plot a little bit with this, but I'll have to fix that in a second. That's not a big deal. And then I want to use a tool that's going to create this into a point, so I can actually get a little point off of it. I'm going to use the Z modeler for that. So on Z modeler, every time you press space, it's going to give you a whole bunch of actions, and it looks super intimidating. And depending what you're clicking, you're seeing completely different stuff, and it's really intimidating. It's okay. It's a little weird, and like most things in ZBrush, you'll only ever use 2 or 3 of these most of the time. I rarely use a lot of these. But then again, every once in a while, someone comes up with a crazy workflow that uses one of these that you've never touched before, and you try it out. So the first thing I want to look at is a poly. This is that poly kind of face. And if I hold space, I see at the top all the things that can be done. Bevels and equalize and insets and inflates. Some of the videos that I showed you are going to demonstrate some of these tools in more depth. And then we see what we're targeting. Usually it's a single poly or some type of poly groups or by like a brush radius. Most of the time I use a single poly, or I use like a poly group island, or I use poly loop. I don't really use many of these other ones, but usually a single poly is one of the more common ones that you'll use. Because for most tools, if you hold Alt, you can drag over the things you want it to affect. So what I'm looking for in all of these things is to split a face. And if I click this now, because I split a face, it's going to draw a line that runs through the whole thing all the way into the center. Not really the one I want, though. I think I'm looking for what insert point does. That's the one I'm looking for. So insert point is going to put a point in the center. And you can see some stuff. The Z intensity is going to be the height I set. So if I set a high Z intensity, when I click this, it's going to move it up by its Z intensity. So let's say that Z intensity like 100. I'll scale it back down. We can see it poked it, it pushed it out, and now I have like a point that I can grab by itself and just transpose up if you want to drag it out anymore. Same deal. I've now got these two objects together, and this time I'm going to go to split. I'm going to go split to parts. Okay, and that's going to let me take this whole deal and fix that by bringing it back down. So I got like a blade. I got a sword, dagger kind of thing. And, you know, we were particularly lazy. We could say that that's enough, but of course there's always so much more we can do. And this is what's cool about ZBrush, is how much we can go into it. Of course, what we know is we want more divisions, more sides to things. And how do we get that with this? Well, we subdivide up. But of course, we're subdividing up and I'm not getting a shape that I want. With any of these, it's getting the right roundness, but some of these, that one doesn't work too bad as a pommel. But something like this starts to shrink up like that. Now, I could take something like this and try to do everything using Dynamesh and all that stuff, but I'm going to show you a better way, especially when working with hard surface objects. So what we want, let's take this example right here, this sword pommel. We want the sides to smooth out, but we want the top and the bottom to stay nice and flat. And we can use something called creasing. So take a look at the object, and what we want to note is that we want to crease along the top and the bottom. So rather than subdividing, if I press D, it's going to preview what it would look like if I had subdivided it. Now this only works if I don't already have subdivisions on the object. So if I divide it and then press D, that doesn't do anything. Now D defaults to going to my highest resolution. But if I go down, let's undo that so I don't have a subdivision, and I press D by itself, it's going to preview and show me these are where the original points were. This is how it's all smoothing out. I generally don't recommend modeling and sculpting a lot in this mode. It's hard to see, but there's a couple cases in which you might do that. But what I'm going to do is I want to create a crease along these edges because those creases are respected by this tool. I'll show you. So if I go to ZModeler and I look at an edge, right now it's set to bevel, which will bevel a whole edge around. Instead, I'm going to set it to crease. And crease will let me click an edge and it gets this little extra, if I zoom in, it's hard to see, but there's a little extra double line running across the whole thing. And now if I press D, you'll see that edge stays sharp and the rest of them don't. So let's undo this. Let's just click around in a circle to get all of our creases. And now if I press D, we see it stays nice and sharp up here, and it's nice, it's down and smooth down there. There is a faster way of doing this, though, that most people use, and that's by using polygroups. Polygroups are something you've seen before, where maybe you have taken an area and you hit Control W, and this is like blue, and this is like they're all different colors. The nice thing about polygroups is we can use this as a way of subgrouping whole sub-tools. So it's like a level beyond, so you have like your tool, which is all the subtools, and then inside of your subtools, you have all these polygroups that we can use to help us organize our project. And one of the things we can do in this creasing menu is say crease PG, which is crease by all the polygroups. So everywhere it can see that there's two different polygroups, it's going to make a crease. Now when I press D, and let's hit Shift F so you can see the results, what it's going to do is smooth out just the stuff I want. Let's do this on our pommel too, to show you a couple different ways we can play with this. So I got my pommel here. It's got a couple features that I like. Maybe I want an inset in this whole thing. So I'll show you something cool we can do with that. Right now, we're used to working in symmetry in regular x-axis. But if we go up to transform, we can also turn symmetry on in different directions. So there's our whole activate symmetry, which is set to X right now. And instead of X, we can set it to Z. So anything I do on the front is going to happen on the back. Let's make sure I reset it to everything. I'm going to hit X to undo this, but basically anything I do forward, activate symmetry, oh, X and Z are both on. Just Z, anything now that will happen in the front will also happen in the back, which can be pretty handy. In our case, we could actually turn all three on if we wanted to, and you can see it'll now touch in like all the corners kind of at the same time, which is probably more than I need. So I'm just going to turn on Z symmetry here, and I'll keep X on at the same time, so we can kind of keep all those together. And then with my Z modeler, I'm going to set on surface to inset, which will let me create an inset on a surface, and I can drag over. And then I'm creating this inset. Didn't really work on the front back. Let's try that again. Actually, I'm gonna go to transform. I'm gonna turn off X. It's distracting me. So it's going the front and the back. And now if I inset, I'm pulling it back there. Now this is depending on how your inset's set. If it's default to inset each poly, it'll do this, which can be cool if I want to say Q mesh a whole poly group. I could get a cool effect that way pretty quickly. So if I was trying to do that, that's what I'd want to do. But that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to inset a whole region, and that's going to bring this in. And I can do that again. So same thing, Alt, give me a little shape. And now I can take all this, and I can sort of move it by itself. So let's say there's a move in here, and I could say move polygroup island, and it'll move just this little island of polygroups. And depending on how I go, it's going to default to align itself to one of the axes, so left and right. But in this case, it's going to default to moving in just this one axis. Great. So let's do the same thing I kind of did before. This is a good start. Let's make sure when I crease polygroups, it's going to crease this and this, but it won't crease this line. So sometimes what I do is go to this guy here, and it's under polygroups, crease by normal. And it's going to group things by their normal direction. In this case, I'm not going to use that because I want to keep these all round. I want to make this separate. But this is where we can use that polygroup thing. So I hold space on this, and I can say polygroup. And this will let me change the polygroup of whatever I'm looking at. And sometimes it's really helpful to say I want this to be in the same polygroup as this. Well, I click it and hold shift to pick it, and now I'm picking out polygroups that are the same as this. So now I have individual groups separating everything. So if I go crease polygroups, turn off Shift F to turn that off, and hit D, we can see it's going to smooth everything out. Now this is pretty cool, but it's got these really, really sharp edges now. What if I want to smooth those out, or I want to make those edges a little rounded? Well, there's a couple ways I can do it. One of the ways that I can do it is by actually, now that I have this set like this, I can go Control D, and then I could turn off uncrease all, and Control D, Control D, Control D. That gives me a nice little smooth edge. But there's a better way to do that, of course, like everything else. So with this still on, my dynamic subdivision still on, I can use some of the tools in dynamic subdivision to my advantage. So I go to geometry, and I want to have crease and my dynamic subdiv both open. And if I hold shift and click it, it'll open both of these, both crease and dynamic subdivision. So with dynamic subdivision, we can turn on how many levels they are. So does it smooth once, twice, 3 times, 4 times? We could start to see here by the time we get up to 5, it starts producing some really smooth looking results, but I still get that crease. But I can also change my crease levels. If I set it to 0, it doesn't crease at all. How strong is that crease is how high I put this slider. And I can even change the way it overall affects the shape. Let's set it to something about 2. So we can see now, I still have my low resolution and I still am able to preview it, but it gives me something a little softer and not so hard edged. I moved all of these up here because I use these pretty frequently, and it lets me change them very quickly. Let's talk about some other tools that we can use. Now this is a cool pommel, but what if I want to like stretch it out a little bit or have it curve up in a cool way? Well, it's not doing that right now. So how would I do it? So I'm going to pull out, let's see, X, and make sure my transforms are set correctly. So those transform settings are per object, so I don't have to worry about changing anything. Let's stretch this out a little bit, and then in order to curve it up, it needs more divisions running along this. It doesn't have anything to bend yet. So I'm going to go to my Z modeler, and this time I'm going to set it to insert. So by default, it's set to insert a single edge loop. I could drag these out by hand, or I could do multiple edge loops. What this will do is if I click and drag, the more I drag, the more divisions it's going to give me. To the point where I can have like way too many. Generally, I want to keep it an even number. Now we can see it polygroups for me, which is fine, but I'm just going to do group by normals anyway, because I want all these at the top. But now I have enough geometry to curve it up. Now I could use my mirror and just kind of push and shove this around, which is by all means totally a fine way to go. But I want to show you some of the tools we can use to make this a little bit more automatic. So I hit W, let's bring it to the home, like so it's nice in the center. And I can take this guy. Let's take a look at this deformer. It's called Bend Arc. And I think sometimes I just have to play with these a little bit to see which one is doing the bending. See if I go like you and you and you. Nope. How about you and you and you? Oop, that's getting somewhere. So this little widget, I guess it's called angle, will let me like slide it. And then the radius is how far out it goes. And then do I want to twist in it? In this case, I don't. But we can see now, by playing with these two sliders, I can play with this shape. And as long as I don't apply this, I can come back and play with this stuff and then hop right back into this and still use that bend arc gizmo to get me a shape that I want. Let's crease it by polygroups. And I'm going to set this back to gizmo. Hit D to preview it, Shift F so I can see it a little bit better. And now we can play with that crease level. I usually set it to like 2 and set the subdivision level up a couple times until I get something I want. All right, and that brings us to the blade. Now the blade is something that I kind of want everything to be pretty sharp on it, pretty much everywhere on the surface. I can't imagine a spot I don't. So in this case, I'm going to go down to my polygroups, and I could say, you know, any of these group visible, I could say this group normals, and I could do it a bunch of different layers, but instead I'm going to use Z modeler, because there's a quick way to do this. And I'm going to say polygroup, and I'm going to say an island, which is like everything that's connected. They call it an island, so all these are connected. And then how do I want to do it? 1 side, 3 side. I'm going to set it to relative -1 or +1, doesn't matter. Basically, it's going to give, I want it to have a little checker pattern to it. So if I set checker, it should give all of these different patterns. It's not really doing it the way I was hoping. But if I just say one group ID is 60 here, I want to get it, do it the way I want it to do it. That's just cycling through. Oh, there you go. Polyorder does it. Polyorder will give each of these their own color. And that way I can go Crease polygroups, D, solo it. And now I know I have something that when I play with it. So what I have now is just a base, a starting point that I can work with. And so I can take any of these, which are currently all in this subdivision preview, And now I know if I Shift D and then just start adding divisions, it's going to work with the creases that I've already set for it. So I can add a couple divisions, and now I can come in symmetry, and let's turn on something like this. Go transform, and I'll do both sides so that if let's set this mask to 10. If I do something here, it's going to do it on the back. And I can now go in and draw out. Let's subdivide it a couple more times. Something like this. And I can check how many polys this is right now. That seems about right. Okay. A nice curve running here. I'll show you a trick too to how I smooth these out. So now I'm going to take all this, and then one of the ways I like to smooth it out is if I Control click, it softens it, and then if I Control Alt click, it hardens it. And this lets me kind of like create something where it smooths out some of the edges with stuff. Let's go ahead and let's just Control click a couple times. I just want to blur out the edges. So before I do all that, go back a little bit. There we go. Something like this. Brushing across. And then just trying to like smooth it out. So sometimes I just like kind of brush and then go across against it to knock out some sides. And then I'm going to invert. And I can come down to depth to form. And with deform, I'm going to do inflate, and I can push it into the model like so. And if I want to get rid of jaggies, I can always move this again, and it will do it softer than the first time. Push it in. And now I'm kind of sculpting, Shift D to go a little bit lower. Now I'm going to sort of sculpting with my sub D mode, but I've already controlled a lot of stuff, and now I'm just worried about details. So I can start adding little flourishes and stuff. Let's go up a couple levels, and let's do like something like a pattern. And let's do inflate balloon. And because I'm in this now, I can hit X, and let's do Damien standard, and I can add some details of like wear and tear. So I'm doing this. Let's create change up this focal shift. So you see the more I change it, it changes the way this little guy goes. It kind of does like a little pinch. There's actually a tool I really like for this kind of detail work. It's called Orb Cracks. It's not one of the default brushes. You have to like find it and download it. You can see like focal shift here at like 100. Yeah, let's get nice and high with it. Kind of create some cool notches and stuff, like where this blade has been dinged up a little bit before, especially in all the battles we imagine you've been getting into with it. And that lets us kind of create some personality and character on something. We kind of imagine we wouldn't get a really sharp sword crease like inside here, because how would a blade have gotten in there? It's most likely going to be around the hilt and the guard. And it's going to be, you know, larger and smaller in a couple areas, depending on how it's knocked away. So getting just a little bit of chipping and notches and stuff like that. And especially in the corner, we might find ourselves, I like trim dynamic for this a lot, just like beating up the edges a little bit. That kind of gives it some real personality. But we started with something really simple geometrically, and once we've got the shapes the way we want it, now we can start really messing with the surface. High polish is really nice too, because it's going to give us like a really strong like attempt to create a solid surface. But I find trim dynamic and trim adaptive, and doing this by hand, I don't do this in symmetry because I want it to look a little different. I want it to look like it's canned rock or something like that. Gives you the kind of like really World of Warcraft stylized look to things. So in a nutshell, that's the process I'm using. Now, with that, I'm going to go to a more complicated shape, a more complicated model that I've been working with. Before I go any further, though, any questions, just throw them out in the chat. Let me know if there's stuff people are confused about or need to know more about. Make sure people are able to get in here. Cool. Well, I'm going to go in and let's pop back into the object that I have been modeling, which is this guy. And I'm using another thing here called live Boolean. You see the difference between Boolean and live Boolean? I'll show you in a second what that all does. But before I do that, I'll show you how I'm approaching this model. And first off, this object, subtool-wise, I got folders, I got tools, and this is a pretty simple object. And look at how many subtools I already have. And I'm going to keep that as separate as I possibly can for as long as I can. It's much easier to work with. But let's talk a little bit about what I'm working on. So this is the concept, and this is the kind of thing I was talking about when I say do lots of drawovers, because they're really, really helpful. So I'm going to start by I'm just using a simple paint program. You can use Photoshop, you can use Microsoft Paint, you can use anything you want. But I really recommend you get in there and you put up your tablet and you start playing with this stuff, because being able to mark what is happening where is really important. So what I'm going to do is I want to break this down into 4 shapes and think about how many major shapes do I have in this thing, because it's going to give me an idea of how many subtools I want to start with. So the first largest kind of shape that I have here is this whole deal, which is my slide. So this is an object that in firearms is used to prime the weapon. And I'm kind of taking the inside and making it separate. The idea is this would rack along the top, and that actually loads another round in the chamber, which is what you would use initially when you're first loading a magazine, because designs like this are all blowback designs, meaning that when you fire the gun, it actually uses some of the energy from the gunpowder explosion to recock the gun and reprime it and load another round in. It's a whole mechanism. It's really fascinating. And I really recommend, if you are interested in prop art, you take as much time to learn the engineering and manufacturing things as possible. So I got this, and this is going to be my slide. That's one part. Now let's pick another color. Let's do like a yellow. And this is going to be the next kind of piece down that I'm thinking about, and that's this little internal piece here. I definitely think this piece is all one piece in here. This is going to be, I don't know, this is like slide inner. I'm sure there's a technical term for that, but it escapes me. Then I got in here this guy, which is the barrel, which is always floating and inside and a little independent. Get a little green in here. I've got this whole mechanism up here, which is like a mount. And I can see this is a separate object. I don't want to model it all together. But I'm not paying attention to little things like screws right now. This is just a mount to mount the next piece, which is this little flashlight assembly. The tracing does 2 things. Flashlight or like red dot, whatever that is. Could be like a laser sight. Oh, it's probably a laser sight, actually. Now that I look at it. Laser sight. So this is my laser sight. And then I have the whole, this guy down here. Go into this purple. This whole deal is our whole trigger assembly, and I'm going to call this the lock. So this is from I think about this in terms of like lock, stock, and barrel. Like that's refers to like old muskets were a stock, which was the wooden part, the barrel, which was the thing running on the gun, and then the lock, which was the mechanism that you would actually, if it was a flintlock or a matchlock, would actually ignite the gunpowder with. And so I'm going to call this the lock as the thing that sort of triggers what's going to happen next. Speaking of triggering, that gives me here my trigger. Then I have Let's go back, and I'm going to be reusing some colors, I'm sure. I have this whole thing, which is like my little foregrip, I'm going to call this. And then continue to go around. I have my side grip. I have like back here, although I can't see it, as well as like, I'm going to call this back grip, because it's going to be the back of my grip. I have down here a magazine. It's not called a clip, magazine. And then down here I have my mag release, or some kind of foot to the magazine, something like that. So we see, like, without even thinking about the details of this thing, without even thinking about the smaller bits, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different pieces that are all functionally here together. And so for me to model this as one solid thing, could I sculpt this all as one object? Probably eventually. It would take a lot of time and I'd be fighting it. So what I'd rather do is think about these as parts by themselves. And if I ask you to model this whole thing, you go, gosh, that looks pretty complicated. But if I ask you to model just this top piece by itself, you go, well, it's not that many things. That's not that bad. And if I ask you to model just this by itself, you're like, well, that's not that many things. It's not that bad. And as we go, we start to see fewer and fewer pieces that we have to work with. It makes it easier to break down our object into these, you know, major pieces. Let's see. So with that, take a look at this and how I'm breaking this down into my scene. So I already did a little bit of work on it, and I already call this the slide. I'm going to change this name to call this the lock, which is not what it is. This folder, I'm going to call this slide. So what I have is a couple of folders to start putting things in, because I want to make little add additions and little things on top of it. But I'm going to turn off this live Boolean really quick. Live Boolean is such a cool tool. And actually, I mean, for me to show you how it works, let's go back to that this guy that I was working with and show you what a live Boolean can do. Let's say I want to put a couple of holes in the base of my blade. Sometimes you can drill holes through that and it makes the blade lighter without reducing its structural integrity. Well, I could try to take this blade like this and try to use something like a clip curve center circle, but it doesn't work particularly well for this purpose. And there's not really enough division on this blade yet to make that work. Again, I could undo it, divide it a bunch of times, so I have a lot of geometry, and then try to flip curve things, but usually it doesn't work that well. So instead, what I'm going to do is use what's called the live Boolean. Now for you, your live Boolean is going to be over in this corner. I have my custom set up, so I move some things around to see where I want them to be. In order to do this, we're going to want to add or append a new shape. So let's append the shape we want to cut it out of it. In this case, it's a cylinder. So I can take this cylinder like so. Let's scale it down. Let's rotate it on its axis. Again, I hold shift to snap those rotation directions. And let's make a hole right back here. So make sure it's large enough to kind of get everything out. And now with live Boolean on, I can take this object, I'm going to stick it right under the blade, which is here, and I'm going to set its mode from additive, which is that two circles together, to one circle cutting another one out. And we see that we have, when live Boolean is off, like that. When it's on, it looks like that. I can still click it, and I can move it pretty freely, and it cuts out pretty much instantly whatever I want. It's really nice, and it's a really easy way of making these shapes. Now, what if I want more holes in this? I could use all the tricks we know from before, like control dragging up to make a couple of these. And then if I turn it back off, I have all my holes by making additional versions of this. But as usual, I got a better way. I can also take something down here under geometry. Oh, actually not geometry, it's under array mesh. So under array mesh, I can turn this on. And let's just solo this really quick so we can see it by itself. Array mesh has a whole bunch of settings of like how I take one thing and make multiple versions. We don't need to do anything that complicated. Let's just take our Z amount and up that until we're getting more. Ooh, not Z, I want to go Y because I'm going up. So whatever I set this to is how far apart this one will be, and repeat is how many they're going to be. And I can actually change too by changing this Y profile. By changing this curve, I can change the rate at which they go, but I want them evenly spaced, so I'm going to keep it pretty even. I got things like pattern length. I wonder if there's a pattern scale to it. I know there's a way of changing how, oh, scale, perfect. So I can change as it goes up. I can change its profile in terms of its scale. So right now, I change this. I think, oh, there we go. That's going to change its Z length, but I want to change the scale equally. So if I set it to go 0.3 in X and 0.3 in Y, then we can see it changes its shape as well. So I get, at the end of the day, an array mesh that I can make some edits to. I can change those things like how far these dots are apart, and I can change how the profile is going to change across. So it's like a lot of stuff we can do with it. And in fact, now that we're changing the scale, I kind of want to change the way in which our Z profile works. So if I pull this, not Z profile, Y profile, so it can adjust like the rate of the change. They feel a little bit more naturally spaced out. Pull these. I'm just changing this curve here. And like I said, it's non-destructive. I can turn it on and off at any time. So let's go back to this guy, and we can see stuff like I have made now more specific tools. So if I go to solo, not this guy, let's go to make sure I'm on the right object. Well, let's find it here. So I've got these, which is this little object. And if I solo it, I can see what I made was a single object, and it works in my sub. I did all the creasing to make it work in my little dynamic subdiv preview, and I've set an array up with it so that it spaces out by itself. And now if I just shift F and turn off, you can see that it's now part of this whole slide mechanism. I want to go through a few of these really quick to show you how they're all kind of built out, and then I'll show you a couple other tricks on how I make some harder to use shapes. So I've made a couple folders, and one of the objects you see here is starting off, if I go to solo, you'll see its core is our main slide. Pretty simple because it's just a big box. Now right under it, cut away from it, is, see, this is not the object I want. Let's do this guy. So this guy cut away, cuts out of here. So the result is, hide all the other ones. You can just kind of see it one at a time. The result is this shape cut out of this shape, which gives me something like this. Then I add this piece on the inside, and this piece is just a duplicate of that one. So I can move it and slide it, and it's now the inset piece by being separate. Then I take this guy, let's turn you on, And this is the little kind of notched out area that I have in the sides that I can just subtract. Here are my sights on the top. They're just a separate object that I have on top of everything. Those little side rails, again, we showed you already, like how those cut in. And then I have my barrel here, and then this piece, which I use as a cutout for my barrel. This is a piece special one I want to show you. So I'm gonna get this guy, Shift F, Shift D, and let's make a couple quick changes to it. I want to get just this inner loop, and that gives me that shape so I can crease polygons. Because those are the, I'm going to uncrease all, crease polygons. That's what I want. So that when I press D, it gives me that nice sharp shape. So what this is one of those cutters that I was talking about. And if I hold, turn off, if I turn on Shift F, I can kind of see ghost it. If I turn it off, I can now move it and see its preview. And you see what I did is I made a bevel. And so the further in I push it, the bigger my bevel is going to be, the further away I do it. I've just chosen the angle for it, and now I get to kind of dynamically grow that. But really all that's happening is I'm just moving this to and away from the object. And as long as the barrel is happening after it, because this does everything above it, if the barrel was above it, the barrel would be gone too, because it would get cut away. So I have to put the barrel underneath it so that can appear. That's how everything on this slide is done. Turn that guy off. Let's start taking a look at some other pieces. So this is definitely part of my grip. Let's put this down into the grip group. I don't need the mount group. I'm going to put this also into the grip group. Which one's this guy? I have to figure out which you are. Oh, this is part of like the lock and everything. And this is also a cutter for that. Oh, this is like my magazine kind of area down there. Let's open this up. So I'm using a lot of folders in here because I find the folders are really great to add. We can always click an object and hit new folder. It just helps me organize things because otherwise it's a lot of objects to keep track of at once and we lose a lot of things. So I've made a couple pieces, as you can see. Turn all this back on, turn off solo mode, and let's turn off the other group. So I'm just looking at the grip right now. Here's my trigger. I'll probably have to make a separate group for just my trigger. So let's say new folder, trigger, because I'm going to need to make a couple cutters for that. Close that. I got the mount. Call this the light, but I'm going to rename this laser. That's going to be for my laser sight. I have everything set here to grip, but I'm going to change this up here because I think this new folder is going to be my mag. And I'm going to put that this little guy. I'm going to put that in my mag folder. Unhide those and I can hide them again. This is all part of my grip and my lock. So I think I want to take this out of grip by itself, make a new folder. I'm going to call this lock. That was the piece I decided it was. And anything related that's not the grip, that's related to specifically that lock, which should be this guy, is going to go into this folder, which includes this little cut piece that I made. Which is giving me this little cutout from the lock. And that lock, and grip should be all this stuff here, which is great. Okay, perfect. So that gives me a lot to work with. So my grip includes some of these cutter pieces that I want to just kind of cut things out. But it looks to me like I need another little notch in this bottom cut piece. So I'm going to solo this dude. Let's hide these other ones. Hide mag. This way I'm only working with just 3 at a time. Otherwise, like I said, it can get confusing trying to select from all of these at once. But I have a lot to work with. Also, good time to save. Okay gun. They call it okay gun because it says okay, and it looks like it's a gun that would be fine. So what I want to do with this is, if I take a look at where it's at right now, it's not bad, but I want it to have another shoot off and to come back down. So let's go ahead and create another division for it. I'm going to have that upper and lower level. I'm going to set my insert ledge loop. I'm going to set this to Q mesh, single poly, pull this back. And then I want to curve this. There's a couple ways of doing that, but here's the best way that I found. Like, I could curve an edge like that to get it exactly the way I want it. Is I'm going to go insert, insert, like so, Q mesh to go down, and then I'm going to do called a bridge. And with this bridge, I can go 2 connected polys, which is going to let me connect these 2. And then I can left and right to decide how high it goes, and up and down to decide how many divisions. I only just want this one division. Maybe 3 would be good. And so now I have like a nice little curve on there that I'm controlling. Group by normals, which is going to help me control some of these angles. And maybe I want to pull this one back just a little bit. Now I can do poly groups. And if I D to preview it, I can see what it looks like. Oh, that's weird. It's like here with the other stuff. I'm getting some weird things going on with some of them. Huh. Well, I want to get rid of the rest of these. So I'm going to say auto groups really quick to kind of get rid of all this stuff. And then I can hide this, and I can do geometry, delete, hit, modify topology. Hit. That way I can use this as a proper cutting tool. Let's turn all of this back on. I can like lift this up into the right spot. So this little cut, I'm going to move this out of the way just so I can see it. Little cut's probably about at the right level. So it's this one. Set our mask to lasso, because it lets me get kind of those weird angles. I can lift this up so it's a little bit more like that. The same deal here. And just push this more towards the right about into there. And of course, I can always Shift F to preview what that cut is going to look like. Yeah, something like that. Now this is going to affect everything, including this foregrip, so I'm going to put it back under this. So it won't affect any of that. This guy. Let's move this down, this whole thing down a little bit lower. So with the cutting tool, get rid of the rest of the stuff here. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Go to this guy, and he definitely comes out too far. So if I take my clip tool, my clip curve, the direction I drag, there's kind of maybe flip some stuff away from it. Still not quite doing it exactly how I want. I'll just mask, invert, and then I can solo and just move it till it's relatively where I want it to be. Getting there. So sometimes I just have to really work with it in this kind of mode until I'm seeing the effect it's having and I make sure that it's exactly how I want it. Something like this, feeling a little bit more like I want it to. Cool. Well, now I'm going to do a little detailing work because detailing work is really fun. I like it. So I'm going to add these little pockmark kind of screw hole things. Because who doesn't like those? So same deal. I'm going to kind of pick an origin point for where I want it to come from. Control click. Hit this here. All right. Fortunately, everything's relatively perpendicular. Makes it pretty easy. So this, kind of looking at it by itself. Actually, let's push it in. So it goes mostly through this grip. And I'm going to do split unmask. So I've got it by itself. Then I solo it. And now to get this little bevel that I want, I'm going to insert an edge loop. I'm going to mask this. So mask area. Get the angles just about right. Make sure I have plenty of length for it because I can always play with it. And then I take this and I say, you subtract from that. However deep this goes, how much I'm going to cut into that. Let's solo this again because I do want modeler, hue mesh, set all these. I can pop that straight out. That's going to go all the way through into there. Solo this again. Do a group by normals. And I'm just going to mask just these. Control W. Crease polygroups. D. Solo. Let's scale a little bit. And again, sometimes I just move this out of the way so I can see a little bit better its position. And as soon as I like where it is, I'm going to just take a look and I'm going to go Control D to drag out another one. Control D, drag out. This is all part of the same subtool. And the bevel, all of these, I can kind of control all together based on how wide or small it is, based on how far in or out it's moving. So again, cool way for me to control all this stuff. And I could have made that bevel really big and wide, and then I can make it bigger and bigger and bigger as I push in. How about this little dude? That's a cool little shape. So I'm going to make this as many separate subtools as makes sense. It's got a different level, it's got a different height, all that stuff. And I know I want it to be, pivot this, and I can also alt-click on anywhere, and it's going to set it to that surface, which is pretty convenient. I know I want it to start right about here. And so let's put in this case, we can see it's got a rounded edge. So I want to put in, instead of a regular cube that I'm going to round out, I'm going to put in polycylinder. Oh, mask it first. Then put in a polycylinder. Rotate it 90 degrees, one more. Flip on mask. Get this by itself. Solo it. Frame it up. And what I'm going to do is take half of it. So I mask half. Control click to get that. And instead of just regular dragging, control dragging is like an extrude. So I can just drag it right out. But it's still going to keep all my shapes. So I'm going to set its pivot. I keep it this way, so if I move it left or right, I can slide it in or out. Because it's got to be a little bit of an angle. So that way I can rotate it relative to this. Still change it if I want. That seems like it lines up pretty close to that. So move this. I'm holding space, which lets me move my like my mask if I don't like where it is. Sometimes I'll draw a mask where it's easy to draw, and then I'll just move it over what I want to hit. It's just an easier way of working. Now I got this piece. I can also do interactively. Choose a level. It goes grip. Group by normals. Crease polygroups. D solo. Sometimes you'll find too. So let's take a look at what happened here. It definitely grouped it. And so I'm going to change its group by normals to a higher number. My max angle is higher. And I'm going to add some divisions that run along. Insert multiple edge loops. And I'm going to do keep polygroup. So it stays in the same polygroup. Because that'll just help control it. Now I increase polygroup and D. It's going to keep that curve a lot better than if I didn't have that polygroup in there. See, I don't have that line. Crease polygroup. D, it kind of goes all the way there. So, and actually I can show you what it looks like. Polygroup. We can see as I add more edges, it sort of helps keep in place. Save it. So it's just a lot of little pieces. I got one off the back though, really similar to this one. So that's probably a good haul. What did I just do? What? Ooh, what happened there? So then I can just take this, duplicate it, rotate it a little bit, hit a slightly different angle. Again, I'm an orthographic side, which makes this easier to work with. So it's like, it's simple things, but we're just doing them lots and lots of times. Cut in a little bit better. I kind of want to hit it a little bit of an angle. I think that produces more of the look that I'm trying to get here. Yeah, something like that. Pretty right. Make this little, I got so many little screw holes and buttons and stuff like that. But this part of the grip's pretty good. How about this foregrip here? So this is, you know, I might as well make a folder because why not? I've got lots of pieces and folders are nice. So I got, that's the spot. Where do you go to? You go to the lock. So where are you? You in. Oh, that's forward. That's why. Pull it out. Separate that into its own little bit. Click you, and go ahead and make folder view for grip. Just like the other stuff. D just gives a preview of it smoothed out. But let's figure out how to get 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to get these little grip things on there. So I'll show you how we do this with ZModeler. I'm going to take ZModeler, Shift D, to get my lower level. I'm going to do multiple edge loops, and I want 1, 2, 3, 4 running through it. Let's do alternate poly group because I think like that. And let's uncrease all. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got 3, 4, 5 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 5. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to try bevel, 2 rows, see what I get. Do it. How can I do it? I guess I could do a Q mesh. I could hit bevel, and I could Q mesh it all, and then it would smooth out pretty well. I'll do that. So I'll do a bevel single row, and I'll just set this as long as I want, and then I can click on each of these, and it will do its own thing. And then I can do Q mesh, and instead of a poly, I'm going to say Q mesh a poly group island. I can kind of push that in like so, and I just click on each of these. So I can see it's going to give me that little kind of pattern, but I still want, let's see, up my smooth value, that. That's bad actually. Line it up and I'll just have it kind of intersect there. That works. Let's go on to then, got all these pieces. Let's move on to the lock. Turn off all these pieces. The grip, and just pay attention to this lock piece. Open you up. And I don't want this little cutter to affect that. Put you under. Because this is that little piece under there. It's going to have its whole own stuff going on. Again, keep it separate. Makes it easier. Now this was a little cutter piece that kind of interesting because the shape I need. And I built it out really simply, but I think I'm going to rebuild it. It's not quite doing what I want it to do. And I'm going to take you, and if I want to line things up, say I want this whole edge lined up, what I'm going to do is select just these, control click, get to my scale tool and click it on to say like this point, change the rotation. And now if I scale together, it kind of flattens and lines everything up for me, which is pretty convenient. So what I want is a shape that's kind of come out and back. And sometimes it takes a little bit of noodling to figure out exactly what the shape of my bevel needs to be. As I can see, it's got to come out and around like so. So what I'm going to try is appending out a new cube like so. And let's unmask. Get this guy. Scale it up. Let's solo this, and I'm gonna do a bevel on the inside like this, so that it's kind of cutting away. Let it cut. So I can see this will now create my bevel. If I make it the right way, I can just shove this over. So let's take this now, demodeler, and let's do insert. And this is going to give me this one edge running through the middle. I just want I'm going to lower it. Now I'll take all of this. If I shove it over, happen. It's getting closer to what I want. Relax a little bit. But I still want all of this part of the bevel. Take all of these pieces, just really crank it back. And I can check it in solo to see what does that mean for my overall shape. That's a little bit closer to what I ultimately want. Take all of this, scale it down, just move it way far out. So it just cuts all the way through this shape. Now I gotta see how to get this to terminate correctly in the corner here. Let's just take this one point, solo that, Shift F, make it to that point. Now I have this little shape just to play with. Just to see how bending this around changes things. Not bad. Because I'm thinking about the overall profile. I want it to stay relatively flat through here. But I think like that should be right. It should be based on its depth. So if I had potentially this whole thing like here, and pushing this should help me control how far it goes. And then this angle here should be really shallow as I want it there. So go ahead and put this, keep that angle really shallow throughout. I'm going to make this real long because I'm going to play with this a little bit. And this is going to give me a tool to decide on. Like depth and length is going to give me what I need. The top of this get beveled too. Yeah, I don't want the top bevel. The top nice and flat. How high do I want it to go? There. Okay, so I see what I need. I need to make this triangle. So I'm actually gonna do a little stitching. I kind of see what I got now. Okay. I need to keep that relative triangular. So I'm gonna stitch here to here, here to here. Okay. I think I'm getting. Now I can take the bottom of this whole deal, lower it. Oh, I'm getting there. I'm figuring it out this time. Straighten this. I like trying new things out like this because every time I do, I learn so many new things about how this program works and how it functions. So here's what I'm going to do. Just solo this again. Just want to see parts and pieces thing. Just want to see how this is going in. I know the overall profile I want. I find it really hard to get it to do exactly what I'm looking for. I guess this is the problem solving of this particular task. Close there for a second, but it just wasn't quite what I was looking for. Quick. Needs to come here. Happening in that corner. Like, what do I think is out there? Because it's more of an angled transition. Like maybe I was a little premature with stitching these together. That's the case. This should all the way there. Terminate the way it is. Meaning I actually need here, and I need another bevel here, right? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to simplify this process. I'm going to do it in stages. Take this. I'm going to go back to making a single polycube. Something really simple. I just want to hit up where this cut piece kind of come in. It should be here, and then it should come back that far. Assuming it's just flat right now. Exactly what I have. Let's get it nice and squared off. I have the depth right. Now, I'm going to use my Z modeler. I'm going to create, I'm going to insert an edge loop, do a single edge loop. I'm going to do it relatively low. Now at this point, he's going to say, what's the angle of this cut? Right. I think angle-wise, sometimes I like draw, like I'm imagining like I'm drawing that line, helps me figure that out. So then that's pretty solid for what I want. So now what I want to do is I'm going to take Control F, and I'm going to take that Z modeler, insert edge loop. Put an edge loop in here. And I'm going to flatten it and knock it right where I want this to trim. Now put in another edge loop. Can't do with that, fix that. And this is like right where that's going to come into play. Now I got this, which means this should come into that shape. These should all come into that shape. Let's just try. As I say, go for broke. Stitch, stitch. Click. Stitching is a little tricky. It really helps if you make your draw size as small as possible when doing this kind of stuff. Because it's not bad, just not exactly what I want. And I tend to get pretty finicky about this stuff because I like things to be exactly the way I'm expecting it to be. So take this and push this whole thing further out. Okay. I think I'm getting this over here. Do something like that. And then if I solo what's going on here, I can kind of clean up a couple of spots and see manually. And then I can do a little poly group through it. Crease poly. Do smooth subdivision up a bit more. Ooh, one more. I want to get this one. Okay, I think I can. I think I can live with that. The only problem I don't like is that inner edge that much, but it's such a small area, and it's not really conveyed very well in the concept. So I have this cutter working on one side. What if I want it on the other side? This is where I could go to geometry and just do mirror and weld. So now I have it in one tool that's on both sides. Say it really quick because I've made some progress in here. The other things on the grip, I got that little divot, I got that little divot, that guy, these buttons. That big button there, which is like probably a safety or a mag release or something like that. So I'll show you how to build that in parts. Click on the surface here. Get about where I want it to be. Click this. And hit that cylinder. Rotate it. On. The other stuff to make sure it's correctly. Turn this back on takes a second because I have a lot of these other Boolean groups. The more I use, the more it's going to slow down my machine. So I want to make sure I'm setting it this out of the way so I can see its position. Should be just about there and a bit bigger. That's good. That'll be the basis for my button. It goes lock. Center this, and I'm going to duplicate that. Oh, first I have to make it a deal. Now I can take this guy, duplicate it. Let's solo it. And I'm just going to take this part of it, unmask it, and then just expand out until it has the angle of the bevel I want. I'm going to make it pretty big, but I just want to get the angle right. Now this piece up, out, turn this on, and then I just move this about where I want it. Everything like I've been doing it before, just group by normal, polygroup it, polygroup it, polygroups, D, turn off solo mode, off framing, hit U, solo, and group by normal. Let's set that up a little higher. Go, Crease polygroups. And then I can always change my crease. That kind of button feel that I'm looking for. And it looks like there's a little grip on the button. Which I can also Boolean out if I'm looking for that detail. Set it on the surface of the object. And mask and add one of these cylinders. this way. Pretty small. Shallower. Down more. Mask. Get it away from that button. Then I just want a couple of these. So array mesh, and we're going to move these forward and back. That's going to be repeat it maybe times. Put it over onto this end. And if I want to make this smaller, these little sliders always, if you grab it, it has a second slider above it. Grip. It makes it a little bit more precise, but can be pretty helpful. Get that repeat up. Maybe 5. Let's see how that. Take that to 4. Probably 8. In this case, let's save it. Okay. I made pretty good progress. I have to go to the bathroom, so I might just sign off here. I might do more streaming or just stream up stuff in the Discord. So sometimes you'll see me in the Discord and voice chat, and there'll also be doing more work, more streaming, more stuff. Obviously, as always, when I'm doing these demos in class, I'm going way, way deeper and doing way more nuanced stuff than I even expect you to do in class. So, and a lot of the time, it's just you would see me going through the process of figuring stuff out. You can always check out the videos, and there's tons of great resources, especially Zbrush's own, that are really great for getting people started out. But thanks for tuning in. I'll save this, and this will be up for everyone to see for posterity. But I'll be releasing and talking about my favorite projects on Wednesday, so look out for that for my project ones. This week is all about just like exploring, experimenting with hard surface so that you're ready for next week when we're going to hard surface out some helmets or some robot heads or whatever you want to do it that way. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and I'll see you on the next one.